everyone and welcome back to John Florio channel. I am Mary and I am an expert on John Florio. Today I want to talk about an interesting topic, Shakespeare authorship question. As you may know, there are some people who believe that Shakespeare didn't really write his plays, but there was someone else, man or woman, who wrote the plays later attributed to the man of Stratford, the actor Shakespeare. These people offer different explanations. They claim that Shakespeare didn't have the culture to write such plays, he couldn't read the foreign books which were the sources that he used for the plays, and so they propose alternate candidates. Now, I want to debunk some of these false theories that people love to spread to downplay Shakespeare and boost their favorite candidate. But before we start, please let me know in the comments if you like this video, what you want to know about Shakespeare or about John Florio. What do you think about this story? Do you really think that Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare? Let me know in the comments and subscribe to this channel. And now, let's start. Modest family. Shakespeare was an aristocrat. This is probably the theory I dislike the most, because it is so classist to think that just because a man was of a modest family, he couldn't become a successful writer. This is why some people prefer to think that Shakespeare was an aristocrat. And it is so wrong because it shows that they know so little about Shakespeare. Shakespeare is an author who is able to describe the low social classes better than everyone else. The servant, the maid, the factotum, their dreams, their desires. So now tell me, how could an aristocrat who lived his whole life in an uptight, rich environment know so well common people, their background, their stories, their desires? They also seem to forget that many Shakespeare's contemporaries had a modest family. For example, Ben Jonson. If you read Ben Jonson's biography, and I read the great biography written by Ian Donaldson, one of the most important biographers of Ben Jonson, you discover that Ben Jonson was forced to work as bricklayer in order to buy books and become a writer. His stepfather didn't want him to go to university to read, to learn. He thought it was a waste of time. It was thanks to Jonson's love for books, for literature and culture that he was able to get into London literary circles and later become one of the most successful dramatists of the Jacobean era. And don't forget John Florio. Florio was no aristocrat. Florio's mother was a servant. Florio's father was a translator, a great erudite man, but he was of a modest family. Florio, as a kid, lived in a little village in soil between Italy and Switzerland. He spent most of his time in this little village with his father. Then at 10 years old, he was sent to Germany to study at Tübingen. It was thanks to Florio's love for books, literature, that he became one of the most important humanists in Renaissance England. But he was no aristocrat, he was a self-made man. So as you can see, you don't need to be an aristocrat to be Shakespeare. Truth is that Shakespeare was not an aristocrat. He had an aristocratic spirit, which is different. He loved to be among aristocracy. He worked with aristocracy, but he was not one of them. He was not blue blood. Italy. Shakespeare went to Italy. Now, this is pretty ridiculous because you can understand how they distort information in order to try to convince you that they are right, that their candidate is the perfect Shakespeare. We know that Shakespeare had an affair with Italy. He loved Italian culture, Italian language, Italian literature. Some people believe that he couldn't know Italy so well and that he necessarily had to travel to Italy in order to know Venice, Verona, Padua, and so on. For example, they propose an aristocrat who went to Italy to show you that he was a Shakespeare because he knew Italy and Italian culture so well. But the whole truth is that he he was not the only aristocrat who went to Italy. There were so many English nobles who actually traveled to Italy. As you may know, Italy was pretty popular at the time, especially in the Elizabethan era. There was a great love for Italian fashion, Italian language, literature, while the English citizens hated foreigners, and John Florio knew it very well. The aristocracy, English nobles, loved everything about Italy. And there was the famous Grand Tour aristocracy did. What's the Grand Tour? The Grand Tour was a traditional trip through Europe undertaken by upper-class young European men when they had come of age about 21 years old. Now, basically, all English aristocrats went to Italy. For example, Philip Sidney went to Italy. He went to Venice. He also met Giordano Bruno. Henry Wriothesley, the third Earl of Southampton, went to Italy, and we know this thanks to John Florio, because John Florio, in a word of words, write that Harry traveled to Italy. The Earl of Rutland, Roger, went to Italy. Everyone went to Italy. Does this make them all Shakespeare? No. Also, let's make another example. John Florio. John Florio loved Italy. He loved Italian literature, Italian language, Italian culture, but he never set foot in Italy. But how he was able to describe the cities of Mantua, Verona, Ferrara in his second fruits? Lombardy is the garden of the words, he writes in second fruits. Does this mean that Florio went to Lombardy? No. So how was he able to describe Venetian customs so well in a word of words? How could he know Italian cities so well? Florio had a great deep knowledge of Italian language, Italian literature, Italian customs, and he never set foot in Italy. So the legend that Shakespeare must have traveled to Italy is fake. Autobiography in the place. Many people who do not believe Shakespeare wrote his plays propose alternate candidates by trying to find parallels between their candidate's personal life and Shakespeare's plays. They try to find secret codes, hidden messages in the sonnets, stories in the play that matches their candidate's life. Like I heard something like, yeah, it was that candidate because he was in prison, and this is the same thing that happened in that Shakespeare's play, so he is Shakespeare. Or for example, yeah, no, it's that other candidate because he killed that man, just like Hamlet killed Polonius, so it is sure that he is Shakespeare. I don't know if this makes him Shakespeare, but it for certain makes him a murderer. Now, I think this is the biggest mistake that you can do when you try to propose another candidate. Why? Because how can you know that the author is actually writing about himself, or he's simply writing a story that he borrowed and making things up? How can you be 100% sure that what the author is writing is a biography of his life? This is the weakest point, and it flows the web of countless blogs in which people try to find similarities between Shakespeare's plays and the favorite candidate. They distort Shakespeare's real essence as a writer to show you the few similarities that match between Shakespeare and their candidate. They should instead do the exact reverse. They shouldn't look at their candidate's personal life and try to find similarities with Shakespeare's plays. They should do the exact reverse. They should look at Shakespeare. What's the most important thing about Shakespeare? The word is the thing. Shakespeare was obsessed with words and language. So what's the most important thing when you have to find traces of your candidate in Shakespeare's plays? You do a stylistic, linguistic analysis of the plays. How does your candidate write? What has he published? Did he write? Did he publish books? How he writes? I'm not talking about find one word that matches with Shakespeare. I'm talking about style. How does your candidate begin a sentence? How does he or she end that sentence? Does he love doublings, alliteration, proverbs, metaphors? Most of the alternative candidates don't even have enough data to make a linguistic stylistic analysis and see if their candidates write just like Shakespeare. They insist on trying to look at their candidate personal life and find similarities with Shakespeare, where you don't know if the author is writing by himself or is simply lying. They look at the psychological profile of their candidate, which is usually overrated because they see them as their heroes, so they boost them, and they look for secret codes or messages that they could match with Shakespeare's plays. By doing a stylistic linguistic analysis, many of these candidates will drop like little flies. Shakespeare retirement and death. Some people believe that since Shakespeare retired in Stratford in 1611 and died in 1613, he couldn't write the plays that were published and written in those years. And most importantly, he couldn't publish the first folio. But if you look closer, some candidates died in the same period, if not earlier, and they propose theories like, yeah, he didn't die, he was a ghost, or he left the place to his friends and he gave them distractions, so that's how they published them, or this is how they wrote the first folio. Now, this is also actually a theory that some Stratfordians propose for Shakespeare. So now I wonder, what's the difference between the Stratford man and your candidate, if there is actually the same exact explanation, if not a more extreme one, like the ghost one? Facts, not opinion. Now I'll show you some of the theories that people propose for Shakespeare authorship question, and I show you how easy it is to dismantle them. And with this, I don't want to ridicule or debunk these theories. Everyone is free to believe what they want. If you believe that Shakespeare didn't write his plays and you have another candidate, it is fine. You are free to believe what you want. You are free to believe that Shakespeare didn't die in 1593, but he continued to live as ghostwriter or simply as a ghost. Or you are free to believe that Shakespeare was an aristocrat who was closed in his castle, a genius who gave his place to a poor actor who couldn't have the culture that Shakespeare shows in his plays. You are free to believe what you want. But I wanted to show you how weak are some of these theories, especially if you are not able to analyze them from an objective point of view, from a logic one. In this way, they remain a nice plot that you can discuss in a pub with a pint with your friend, or a nice plot for a movie, but not something you can discuss seriously. I think the Shakespeare authorship question is actually an interesting topic. Problem is that sometimes I think that this subject is not discussed seriously, and it leads toward conspiracy theories more than actually interesting and reasonable explanation on how Shakespeare wrote his plays. I have my personal idea on this subject, which is probably different from everyone else, but this is not the time to discuss it. I want to know your opinion on this subject. What do you think? Do you think that Shakespeare wrote everything by himself? Do you think that there was another candidate, another man or woman behind him? Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Don't forget to subscribe and stay resolute. Bye!